All right. Welcome everyone to this Northwest CUHO webinar. My name is Megan Lockwood. I am the Northwest CUHO Communications Director, and in my day job, I am an Executive Assistant and Project Manager for University Housing and Dining Services at Oregon State University. Today, we'll be hearing from Mez and Craig from North Island College. Welcome. Thank you both so much for being here. Their program is titled Building Belonging in tul'al'txw, the journey to equity, indigenization, and inclusion in campus housing at North Island College. I will let our presenters introduce themselves and their presentation a little more. So please go ahead and take it away.
Thanks very much indeed. Craig, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Craig, and I'm the honor of being the Director of Student Affairs at North Island College. And I am really, really excited to refer to Northwest CUHO as one of my professional homes alongside the RLPA. And it's really, really wonderful to be here today to share with you some of the amazing, incredible work that Mez and Angie and the team in student housing have done over the last 3 years. And it's been a long 3 years, but a successful one and a wonderful one. And it's been great working together. And I'm just excited to share this story with you all.
That's awesome. Thanks, Greg. And I'm Mez, and I'm the Associate Director of Student Life and Housing at North Island College. Nowhere near as charming or articulate as Craig, so there's going to be an interesting journey that you folks are on for the next few minutes. Craig, you're the slide mover, so if you could please move to the next slide. Excellent. These are the folks that form part of our team, ranging from, well, you've got Craig and myself there. Angie, our manager of housing, is currently dealing with an alarm in housing. We've got our folks that work within the community, developing the actual programming. You've got the folks that work on the portal system as well. So I think that's 6 excellent humans that are working on this together. Next slide, please. This map is one I borrowed off our website, and it essentially captures the area that North Island College serves. We've got 80,000 square kilometers in our region, and we serve 35 First Nations in our spaces. The pictures that we've listed on this particular slide, we've got our Comox Valley campus up at the top, and this is the campus that our housing building is based at. In the middle, we've got our Campbell River campus, which is also our largest trades campus, and then at the bottom, we've got our Port Alberni campus, which we often say is small but mighty. I haven't included Mihalakweela here, because that literally is a campus in a mall, but it does serve 40 students and a large portion of the community as well. So really large impact across a broad area. And I know that Craig's going to be saying, Mez, you've forgotten the digital campus. No, I haven't. Those are the folks that essentially come in from all over the place, often with network and connectivity related challenges. So as we move forward, we'll be pointing out some of the bits and pieces that make us who we are and how that impacts the work that we're doing in housing. Next slide, please, Craig, and this one's yours.
Perfect. And just before I move on, I think this map also contextualizes, because you've noticed that Northwest CUHO, neither Mez nor I did a land acknowledgement when we began, because we serve so many different people from so many different lands, and we move throughout these lands on a regular basis. I think it's also important to recognize that in both our cases, we've been shaped by multiple lands around the world and multiple territories of Indigenous peoples. And we're grateful to every single one of them, because each and every single experience that we have and experience of learning that we have has shaped the people that we are, like Mez just referenced. We encourage people to examine your own journey through the world and who the traditional peoples of those lands are, and learn more about them, and consider how those traditions may have shaped you, even if you aren't necessarily aware of them, and personalize your acknowledgement of that experience and that learning, because that's a lot more important than reading from a script at the beginning of a meeting. Oh, we're doing a land acknowledgement on this one. I messed up, Mez. I'm so sorry. I jumped ahead. This is what I do. See, Mez joked with me about reading the notes, and I did read the notes, but Mez and I have had a very busy week. And I think, Mez, you were around like 1 a.m. I was at 2:30 a.m. Like, when we're getting up to start our days kind of thing. So you're gonna have to bear with me today because we're working on a few dusty brain cells, a few tired brain cells, and probably not enough caffeine. I'm gonna turn this over to Mez to do this slide as her notes mentioned, and I remember reading them several hours ago. I'm so sorry, Mez.
No, I find this very entertaining, and I'm sure the
I
folks
know.
on this call who know you are also chuckling away most merrily as I am. Um, and I think what Craig spoke to was, in fact, the heartfelt acknowledgement that both of us feel, and the gratitude that we feel when we come into these spaces every single day. This is a slide that captures the college's formal acknowledgement of our territories, and recognizing that we've got welcome in 4 languages here: the Nuchanuth, the Likwila, Kwakwala, and the island Comox, and in that space, we've mentioned the 35 First Nations. I think for both Craig and I, as we are guests on these lands, we come from different spaces. Regularly, we express our gratitude to the First Peoples of these lands, and daily, I think we commit to sharing what we bring to these spaces in the best way we can. And today, we're committing to sharing our learning and our experiences in as open and honest way as we can, with all good intentions, with all of you at Northwest NWACUHO. So I think here we want to sort of look for. We were at the Northwest NWACUHO conference earlier this year, and Craig, when he wasn't wearing his fisherman's pants and standing there with his friend, who I'm not going to be throwing under the bus today, we spoke about Andy Everson's legend of Quinish, the great white whale, and we spoke of the story, and we reflected upon the learnings, the values in that story, and moved forward with respect to highlighting how bits of the project had aligned with those. Today, what Craig and I are going to do is take some of the learning that we've had over the last 3.5 years, and then towards the end of the session, if we still have time, we will tie it back to the legend of Quinish and identify how we bring that together, almost full circle, which I think often makes sense in our hearts and our minds. When we shared the picture of NIC with yourself earlier, we're a relatively small institution with no history of housing. And about 5 to 7 years ago, someone somewhere, maybe 10, 12 years ago, thought that housing would be a great addition to our college with respect to reducing barriers and increasing access to education. And once those wheels started to turn, they turned slowly, but they did continue over an extended period of time. So when we started building it about 2 years ago, that actually was a work in progress over a decade's worth of work. And I want to specifically reference Ian Johnsrud here, who worked with North Island College to develop our business case and to do the original case study for what we now have, which is tul'al'txw, and to recognize that those footprints laid in the sand all those years ago are now the reason why we are where we are. We also acknowledge, of course, the vision of the Comox First Nation and their support through this project, and then the support that we've had from the ministry, and very importantly, the financial support that we've had from the ministry, because this was not a cheap build. And in their fulsome commitment, it's allowed us to deliver a project that has true intention and true commitment with respect to the culture and the community that we're serving. Folks, you'll see Angie's just popped on, having dealt with some alarm in housing. I'm going to give her a brief moment to introduce herself and then hand over to the next slide where Craig will talk about preparation, research, and understanding.
Good afternoon. Angie. Oh, I got to breathe for a second because I actually just did run back from my desk. Angie, German glue, Comox, Angie Ethnan, Hega, Germany, Clue, Hega, Clue, England, Comox. Hello, my name's Angie Price, and I've just introduced myself in both Ayajutham and Kwakwala, 2 of the languages spoken with the Comox people, of which we worked really closely on this housing project. I am the housing manager, and yes, currently just came back from a false fire alarm due to some dust getting pushed into the hallway. and thus got off 911 to make sure the fire department was not dispatched. Thank you.
Thanks, Ange. Okay.
So the project started with a couple of different sort of big efforts that Mez already referenced, and when we got to the point of doing the RFP process, we actually when we issued the RFP, we weighted different aspects of the project differently. So obviously, we wanted to make sure that the RFP reflected our priorities, and the number one priority was how would the designers embrace the concepts of indigenization. It's really important now that I pause for a moment, and it's very, very critical. And something I learned very early on is that a phrase that our friends and brothers and sisters in the Comox First Nation taught me is nothing for us without us. And so that was something that we wanted to carry through and make sure that we weren't just folks with non-local identities coming up with stuff on their behalf. We wanted to make sure that we were understanding deeply what would make this place appropriate and reflective and fulfill our vision of reflecting different ways of being, knowing, and doing. I think if you think about like colonization in general, it is a disrespect for different ways of being, knowing, and doing, specifically Indigenous ways of being, knowing, and doing. And in our case, we wanted to show respect to Indigenous ways of being, knowing, and doing as an opposite to that, because that would be a version of decolonization. And we didn't necessarily talk about it this way, but we did specifically talk about the desire to show respect for a different way of being. And that meant that we worked with the designer and we looked through the RFP, different processes. We looked at all the proponents, but the one that really caught our eye was the one that had some of the examples that you see here. They clearly did deep work to understand certain aspects of Comox culture, Comox design, and Comox architecture. And when I say Comox, I do mean specifically the Comox First Nation. They traveled here, they spent time with people, they did research. It wasn't just a generalization of Coast Salish peoples in general. It's not like meant to be a pan representation. It was meant to be specific. And they looked for symbolism and specific ways of making the building more than just a building. So the building itself, by design, is reflective of different principles and project approaches that are reflective of our brothers and sisters in the Comox First Nation. You can see how the traditional entry facade of a what we would commonly refer to as a big house. There's different language, different terms for this. Sorry, folks, that's the 2:30 a.m. brain cells coming through again here. There are different words for this, but the big house is like a common one throughout the region. And you can see how they conceptually sort of split that open and reflected that in the project. You can also see like the Indigenous log splitting method here featured on the right-hand side. And that actually informed the full-on shape of the building and how it was reflected. And the idea of having the buildings focused around a central hearth was something that was important to us because, again, that's just a concept that exists within the practice. The other one that's really important, and most housing professionals will relate to this, is that if you're doing buildings on campus, you typically want your first-year undergraduate population in one side of campus, and then you want your families on the other side of campus. And that's for lots of good reasons that I'm sure we've all experienced and lived through if you've lived on a campus with both family and non-family housing. But that's not the way it's done. It's multi-generational communities. And so we have family housing with children right alongside our first-year students or second-year students and everybody else. And they're gathered around these three different buildings. There's an integrated playground. There's a few things like this that are really reflective of that multi-generational space and that multi-generational community. Because again, we're really trying to intentionally build and create community with the design. And the reality is that you can just walk around and learn. And so we've got some initiatives and projects in mind for the future where you can actually, like, if you want to learn something, you can scan something on the wall and it'll teach you what that means. And so these are concepts of bringing this space to life. I apologize. I'm not able to actually see my notes because I wasn't expecting to drive. And so my notes are on the next page. And so Mez, I'm going to ask, is there anything else that you need me to speak to or you would like me to speak to on this slide, or am I okay to go to the next one because I can't see the other one?
You're good. You can move on to the next one. And I think the next
Thank
one's
you.
actually going to be me. And I'm going to, but it's going to be really quick. I'm not going to be a negative Nelly today and talk about the floods that we experience in many ways in housing as we move towards achieving occupancy. I've added some of the pictures of the build here, and they're great to see because it's a beautiful space, and it was a beautiful space in development. It was also late. And as we had student applications coming in and no building to put them in, there were constant discussions about whether we're pausing on taking applications, what we're going to do with folks when they do arrive. Angie and Amy did an incredible amount of work connecting with our local hotel just down the hill, trying to find spaces for our students. And when we received occupancy of our family building, ad hoc pairing people who had initially requested individual spaces in shared spaces. And it was an interesting and time-consuming but really heart-led process, and so effective that some of the folks that were paired in these rooms actually refused to move out and continued to stay in the building that they were put in. And it was the space of just winging it and working with it. Next slide, please, Craig. I've put some of the more decorous slides up here, and I think just for giggles, I've actually put in a video of Angie testing one of the doors, because every time you open it, she's like bemoaning the sadness of the door that doesn't open. Craig, if you go to the one, yep, that's the one. You can just listen to Angie.
For the Elders Lounge area shows red, but the door doesn't latch shut. It doesn't matter if I try and push it closed, the door always opens.
And now for posterity, we have preserved that. And I think it just captures what happens when we've got new builds, right? It's the doors, the mechanisms, the access control, the endless keys, the falling smoke seals, the drywall. It's one thing after another while we're trying to move towards occupancy. And it's such an interesting space where how you deal with the challenges is really what I'm talking about here. There are ways to throw up hands and to sort of engage in real, just aggressive or ultimatum related conversations. And I think where there have definitely been frustrations, I think it would be wrong to say that there haven't. What's been interesting is the manner in which folks have engaged with the challenges that we've been experiencing, engaging with the folks that were working with us on this build, engaging with members of our team, and having, colleagues in other departments roll up their sleeves when we had a flood and participating in the problem solving and addressing of those situations. It's a real team effort. It's a real relationship and community-based effort. And where sometimes we think about opening housing as opening a housing building as a housing department. At NIC, the college opened housing. It wasn't a housing team. It wasn't a housing building. It was an NIC opening. And it was reflected in that it was merged with the 50th celebration that our institution had this year. It's our 50th birthday, and we opened housing at the same time. And I think it just speaks to the values that underpin the work that we've been doing and that we're moving forward with. Craig, if we go to the next slide. And this is the slide where you're going to be chatting about the community, the opening, the commitments and promises made.
Thank you, Mez. I actually have my notes now. I pulled them up on my telephone because I'm a multitasker extraordinaire, and that's how we're going to do this. The only thing I would add that Mez is being a little unkind, because let's be real, doors are kind of new technology. We don't have them in a lot of places, so we have to expect that they're not going to work right. So obviously I'm kidding, but Mez is quite correct that the approach we took was full of like a lot of humor. And certainly, as every housing professional knows, if you can't laugh when the doors aren't working, the fire alarms are going off, and everything else, well, it's going to be a long night. So you better make a habit of finding the humor and the joy in things. And for me, a lot of that was from what Mez described. It was the people. I remember like coming back from the gym one night, like 8 o'clock, and there was our director of facilities, like mopping floors and cleaning things up because of an incident that happened with some unclean water entering the building. And that kind of commitment was really appreciated when we saw them showing up when it really, really mattered. And that was fantastic. We want to talk a little bit about the cultural and identity pieces, because we did want to make sure that the foundation of this building was in core values. And so obviously there's a very fine line here between doing things in a good way and cultural appropriation. And so again, I've already mentioned this phrase, but nothing for us without us. We stood up a Comox cultural committee that included multiple members of Comox First Nation that we worked with. It was a smaller group that came together and talked about what does this mean and how do we bring this up. I am far from an expert on Comox ways of being, knowing, and doing, and same with Mez. We're learning as much as we can, as quickly as we can. We are experts on housing, and so it was how do we bridge ways of being with traditional practices in housing. So for instance, how do we do orientation differently? How do we do move-in differently? How do we do check-ins differently? Because much of this stuff is very westernized, and we explore all sorts of different ways of actually operationalizing differently. If you're willing to think a little bit outside the box on this stuff, there are incredible opportunities to indigenize your operations or to reflect Indigenous ways of being, knowing, and doing in your operations in a respectful and integrated way that can really help enhance the experience. Obviously, our core values were very, very important to us, and I don't have them in front of me in the notes, so I won't list them off, but NIC is, and the Department of Student Affairs is very, very big on core values. So one of the things we do in the Department of Student Affairs, of which student housing is a part, is that as soon as somebody starts working for us, they get a printout of NIC's core values in a frame that they can put up on their wall by their desk. And the commitment that Mez and I make as leaders is that whenever we're making decisions, we will make them in alignment with those values. And that allows our people to understand that when we're making decisions, we're looking at those values, and then they can kind of predict what our decisions are likely to be because they know what's most important to us, and those are those values. When you consistently make decisions in alignment with values and your people are consistently able to predict the decisions you make, it tends to generate trust and community. And that's really what's core to this, is trust and community. And it was really great working with the team throughout this process to make sure that we were able to do that. We made some real promises, personally and professionally, and the personal ones were way more important to all of us. This was way more than just a project for the people involved. It was an opportunity to do something that was really special. And I think deep down in our hearts and souls, we all felt that as we worked through this process. We had a team commitment to upholding these promises to our students, to our partners, to our campus community, and to the broader Vancouver Island community that we serve. And it came through in the way that our various different programming is arranged. So the manner in which we provide support, the programming and the policies that run through housing, it's all very much relationships first. And that reflects what we heard and what we experienced with our brothers and sisters in the Comox First Nation. You see some photos on the slide right now of our opening. It was an absolutely wonderful day. Personally, I missed it because I was dealing with a different thing, which is like the nature of student housing and student affairs. We all know that's how it goes. But I was so glad that we were able to capture the experience and share it with people through these beautiful photographs. There was beautiful singing, beautiful dancing, and the whole event just felt, even though I wasn't there, I was living vicariously through people with text messages and photos and stuff like that. And I have to say that the incident that day was not a big deal because my heart was incredibly full seeing this go on and seeing this wonderful achievement as we worked towards our opening and celebrated the opening of our building, even with all the curveballs and bumps along the road.
I think, could we possibly lean on Angie over here to share a little bit about the art and the artwork around the building? But she'll need to unmute herself first.
It's on the same system as the doors, folks. It'll just take a second.
There
you go.
If I'm lucky clicking it, it decided to go into not responding. Yeah, so we have various different pieces of artwork on the exterior of the building that were designed by Comox members. So on the left, we've got Trevor Hardy, and on the right, or sorry, in the middle there is Pam Mitchell. And Pam Mitchell did the painting that you can see to the right, which represents the 7 different crests of the Comox people. So we were very delighted to have these artists create artwork that represented the nation, and that way students can see themselves reflected on campus when they come. So it was absolutely amazing to have them as part of the project.
That's awesome. And Craig, if we could go to the next slide, please. This, I think, brings us to the significance of the work to and on the different levels, right? And Angie spoke of the artwork on the buildings, and from the get-go. If you look on the left-hand side of this image, you'll see some wooden strips, very finely grained on there. If you zoom in super carefully, you'll notice Trevor Hardy's two-headed thunderbird on that wooden wall. Front and center, we've also got the playground that Craig spoke to earlier in our conversation about, and this is in front of our family building. And the family building has been gifted a name, NWACUHO, which Angie will speak to again in a moment. And as you look through the building, you can see the nature of the spaces created, spaces to connect, spaces to engage. I think when we look at the structures, that then extends to the fun things like policies and processes and the frameworks. And so if we look at how we engage in addressing conflict, and through the processes built in there, we start with alternative resolution processes and move towards the formal. Relationships and conversations are used to engage with understanding. Conversations start from a place of curiosity and seeking to learn more rather than a place of jumping to a conclusion. Even the definition of family for North Island College is broader. We speak to your family being folks that are involved in supporting you in your learning journey. And that could be who you count as your family. It doesn't necessarily need to be a biological relative or a legal partner. We do obviously recognize that we should have paperwork when it comes to children, and we're doing what we can there and ensuring that we're being mindful of that. But that intention, right, and carrying that through. Craig, you've got the next slide, and if you could please. No, sorry, that's Angie. Angie's got the next slide, and then you've got the one after this.
I do. So we had an amazing opening celebration back in September where Comox First Nation guided that celebration in the morning by gifting us names for the main parts of our buildings. So the entire housing complex was gifted the name tul'al'txw, which is a pentl'ach name, and with the language warriors gave us the opportunity to record their voices. Did we want to press play on that one? This will be
tul'al'txw, tul'al'txw, tul'al'txw.
So that was Jesse Verkalma in the pentl'ach language. And then what we'll do is we'll go down to the center area where we've got NWACUHO, and that is our Indigenous gathering space. And this name was gifted in Ayajutham from Molly Harry.
NWACUHO, NWACUHO.
So many of these, both the sounds that we're hearing in those names are quite difficult for us to pronounce when we haven't grown up listening to them. So it's taking us lots of practice in order to hear them and then also say them. I'd like to just go over the three that were gifted for the Knowledge Bridge. Each level is quite unique in the way it was designed. The top one, which is NWACUHO, is the reflection bridge, and it's the bridge that's highest, closest to the sky. So all of the furniture that's on that level is blue, and it's also been designed to create small pods so that students can have these small conversations with each other.
NWACUHO, NWACUHO, NWACUHO.
So that's Sarah Child in Kwakwala. Our next bridge down below, Nonohotananape, is again in Ayajutham, and it's our feasting bridge, where it's more tables and chairs that are set up. It's got a very large community kitchen with the stove, the oven, 2 fridges, and a very large counter space, which gets used frequently for students who are wanting to cook meals together. This level, when you look out the windows, is right looking at a large group of Douglas fir trees. And so the furniture is connected to being green to the level that's closest to the tree level.
NWACUHO, NWACUHO.
So again, that was Molly Harry in Ayajutham. And then the Knowledge Bridge that's closest to ground level, tul'al'txw, is our gathering place. And so it actually has, Dialogue Bridge, my apology, Dialogue Bridge. It has the furniture that is larger groups for bigger groups of students to come together. And being closest to the ground level is in the natural earthy colors, more the browns and the beiges.
Sorry, folks.
Tul'al'txw, tul'al'txw, tul'al'txw.
And again, that's Jesse Rakama in the pentl'ach language. So the 3 different languages are used throughout the gifted names.
I think when you hear those names and you hear them spoken, when you hear Molly Harry's voice and you hear the years that sit so gently upon her, there's an opportunity to truly recognize how long, and the time that goes backwards as well as the time that goes forwards. It's a constant reminder of the connections and the impact of this work directly on our students, on our community, but also on our broader community. And we know that memories are long, right? So something happens today, we don't forget easily, we don't forget quickly. And so it's really important, I think, in all these spaces where, with, for example, our gifted names, the commitment has been made to uphold, to uplift, to honor, and to use them in daily living and in constant reference. Sorry, Craig, I got
That's
full of
really
feelings and had to say that.
no. I was just gonna add on to that, Mez, because I think what you're saying is a really important point. Because it was one of the conversations we had, and I say conversations. I'm not saying like difficult challenges or anything like this, but conversations, because people are used to operating in a Western model, and so the conversation is like, well, can we have one name in the system that aligns with the model that we have, like building 1 East type stuff, and then just a different name on the signs? And we decided, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to have the same name in the system as we have on the signs. And we had to make some changes in terms of like punctuation and a few other things to the systems to make that work. But the reason that we wanted to do that is what Mez is talking about, is like, we want people to use these names in all the time, regularly, in a normal way. And people were like, well, that's going to be difficult. And Angie referenced this. These are unfamiliar sounds for some folks. But that's okay, because on our campus, we have like Puntledge and Raven, and I'm not sure which one's which. And so I still learning where those buildings are called. And as you move through campus, you learn the names of buildings, and you learn them because the community is using them. And so I don't even know those ones yet, but I promise you I'm going to learn one of these years. These ones are already cemented in my mind because it is so important. And so when you're doing a project like this, consider not just the front end stuff and what it looks like, because that's largely superficial. Go deep into your operations and go deep into your systems, as deep as you can, and see what else you need to adjust alignment of to make these kinds of things come to life in a really authentic and true way for the full community. This is an example of how we tried to do that. And so we've got our signage in the building, which is all multilingual. It's got Braille, it's got English language, it's also got Kwakwala, Ayajutham, and icons. And so this is our way of trying to invite as many people as possible to navigate our space with comfort, familiarity, and a feeling of home, because that's what we were building. Some students, as everybody in housing knows, that students show up and they might not know who they're going to be 8 months later, but they're there to figure it out sometimes. And sometimes that 8 months is the only time they get in a safe place to figure these things out. So the more welcoming and inclusive you can make your spaces, the more likely students are to be willing to explore themselves and explore their identities. And I think it's one of the greatest gifts of student housing professionals that we get to play a part in helping people become who they're meant to be. And spaces and signage and the way that you lay this stuff out makes a big difference on their ability to do that. We also made sure, of course, we had like things that we wanted to make sure we included for health and safety reasons and just business operations of the college. So things like having a really big address up front makes it very easy for fire departments and things like this to come find us. So it was really about balancing these different needs of various different stakeholders, where again, our local emergency services, they needed big numbers, but our community needed multilingual signs and iconography. And we committed to embracing all of that in our build and our design.
Awesome. This is a just shy of 4-minute clip of Andy Everson's Legend of Quinish. I think if you could press play.
In the Comox Valley, the legend of Quinish tells how an old man had a dream where he was told to warn the Comox people to prepare for a coming disaster. The voice in the dream told him that soon the rain would begin to fall, and it would not stop for a long, long time. This constant rain would result in tremendous flooding, and the people must work hard to prepare themselves for this time. The Comox chief listened to the old man's story, and due to his respect for his elders, decided to take his advice. Groups were assigned various tasks, some to build more canoes, others to harvest much cedar bark and then have it prepared for weaving, as many miles of rope would be needed. Fish had to be smoked, seafood dried and preserved, deer hunted, and the meat cured and made ready. Yet others were to make capes and woven hats that would be needed to shed the rain. Even the young children had to give up their games in order to help with the preparations. Finally, everything was ready and just in time. As the voice in the dream predicted, the rain began. A group of the strongest and wisest men was sent to the top of the glacier, where they were to find the ideal location to attach the cedar ropes. The place of attachment was crucial, as the very future of the people depended on their correct choice. Before long, the rivers began to flood, so the canoes were loaded with their provisions, necessities, and people, and attached to the cedar ropes from the glacier. Soon the waters rose above the totem poles, and each day they saw things that were familiar float by. The rain continued to pour, the people became frightened, and the canoes required constant bailing. Days and nights passed, and the waters rose up the sides of the mountains. The rain was relentless. Eventually the day came when the glacier was almost covered and every person began to pray to the Great Spirit. And then something they had never dreamed possible occurred. The glacier, the very one that they had seen and watched from a distance for many years, suddenly took on a life of its own. It began to float and broke through the surface of the floodwaters, the way a great whale breaches. At first the people were in awe of this unusual spectacle, but they soon began to understand what was happening. The people began to laugh and cheer and cry out to each other. "The glacier is a huge white whale," they said. "Quanish." Soon, to their joy, the rain stopped, and for the first night in a long time, they were able to have a comfortable sleep in their canoes. The next morning the sun shone through brightly, and there was great excitement in the canoes. There was laughter and words of praise in their voices. The people began planning celebration for when they would be safely back at their village. As the waters subsided, Quanish began to settle back into his former position, where the people see him and admire him to this very day, overlooking the whole Comox Valley as if he were resting upon a throne. So honored is Quanish that on the tribal grounds by the Comox estuary, he is symbolized in paint on the front of one of the remaining longhouses. Here the people assemble, dance, and sing in the shadow of Quanish.
It's gone by in the blink of an eye. We started this project thinking we were going to be building a house, thinking we were going to open it up to students at the college. I think for both Craig and myself, we've been here for a relatively short period of time. Angie's got a much longer stint. She's a member of the community. She's a member of the nation. And she's been at the college for over 20 years. It's interesting how this project has brought different folks together. There was definitely a great deal of foresight and preparation. There was definitely, and we've spoken to the community effort and the unity through the work. The challenges that we faced, and I think while we were at Northwest NWACUHO, we spoke to some of those. Every challenge, while it might not have had a solution, did reach a point of resolution that permitted us to move forward. And we can see the building in front of us and the students in the building as a result of that. What we have tried to do is embed connection to land and culture, and to do that in a way that is intentional and meaningful. And what we have tried not to do is to be performative in our efforts. And that's a challenge, because it's not a 1, 2, 5, 6 person party. We're an institution with many, many individuals. And as much as, And well, Angie never does this, but as much as Craig and I would like to say that we're the bosses of some stuffs, it may not always be so true. The opportunity to share our voices, though, and to have an opportunity to have moved this project in the direction that it has gone. Now we look towards the future, right? Folks are transient in the space, and I think Craig can speak to his date of arrival, and for myself, it was the 5th of September 2019. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know that what we're building is for the future. And so every student that moves through our housing needs to have that opportunity to learn, to grow, to be safe, to feel welcome. And in doing so, if our commitment is that we have fed the next generation the nourishment they need to move on, then I think I'm looking over at Craig, and I know that he's going to want to say some stuff, but I think that we would say that we have started in a good way.
Couldn't agree more, Mez. And hearing you talk actually makes me quite emotional. And I'm going to try not to like blubber for you folks because we're being recorded and people are going to watch this on YouTube. So I'm going to do my best to hold my emotions together. To see this team come together, because to be honest with you folks, I didn't have a very active role in student housing. It was Mez that led this project at the beginning, and then when Angie joined, the two of them are like peas in a pod, and they are executing some of the most incredible stuff I've ever seen. Watching this team come together has been one of the most, I don't even have a word for it, but it was one of the most impressive, amazing, incredible, and full of gratitude things I've ever got to experience, because I'm so glad with the work that these folks did on this building. I think we did start in a good way, but there's a couple things I want to say to anybody watching this video in the future. Not everything in this building is going to be perfect, and we are going to get it wrong. And that's something that we started with, knowing that we were going to make mistakes. But what we heard really loudly and clearly from our partners is that if we're not willing to try, which means we have to be willing to make mistakes occasionally, then we're not going to make things better. And so you have to lean into this work, and you have to be vulnerable with it. And you have to be willing to put things like ego and self aside and really focus on what it is that we're trying to do when it comes to our commitments under the calls to action and truth and reconciliation. And when it just comes to our commitments as human beings, living in community with other human beings. It's hard, very hard, but it's very, very important. And so I would encourage people to remember that perfect is the enemy of good. And if you work closely with great partners and you listen to them and you really try and understand them from like an internal place, you will do things in a good way, because it doesn't have to be in a perfect way. It just has to be in a good way. And I believe that's what Mez and Angie and the team have achieved here. And I'm really, really proud of it. So thank you guys very, very much for your work on this. It has not been a short road, but holy cow, Mez, you said it. It feels like the blink of an eye. And now we're really hopeful that other people in our professional community can learn from what we've done, see what we've done here together, and hopefully improve upon that for your builds on your campuses to really drive this forward. Because the only way forward for everybody in this country and frankly everywhere else is going to be together. And I think that this building really represents that. So thank you all very, very much for listening to us today. I want to turn over to Angie and see if, Angie, do you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share?
Oh, it's been an absolute amazing opportunity to be part of housing. This was not my background for my many years at NIC. So I more or less jumped in with 2 feet and said, what can I do? What can I help? And it's been a steep learning curve, but absolutely amazing, particularly when you see the students living in housing that are now saying, hey, I'm only here for a 1-year program, but I really want to stay living in housing. What program can I apply at next year so I can stay? So all the hard work we've been doing, and a lot of it behind the scenes that the students aren't aware of, it all makes it worth it when you see them happy living in housing, not wanting to move out, or making recommendations to family and friends to come and stay with us.
Thank you. That's brilliant. And it's always reassuring as a post-secondary to know that they want to stay.
Yes.
Craig, I'm going to give you the final word because it's good like that.
All right. Thanks, Mez. Well, folks, that's the story. There's so much more that we weren't able to fit into this presentation, but stories are really important. So I hope you enjoyed this one and you enjoyed listening to us tell it. If there's anything that we can do to support your work in this space, personally or professionally, I know I speak for all 3 of us when I say please reach out to us. maybe give us a few months to get all the doors working first because we're a little busy right now. But once we're there, please reach out to us so we can help you because we're stronger together, and we really want to see this way of being spread to other campuses because the benefits we're already seeing from our students being able to experience a sort of two-eyed seeing sort of student housing operation. It's incredibly inspiring, incredibly moving, and I'm really, really excited that my 5-year-old is going to grow up in a world where programs like this one exist. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you all for your presentation. Are you willing to take any questions if folks have any? Okay. We only have a few minutes, but if there is anyone on today who has a question, you are welcome to either unmute and say it, or you feel free to put it in the chat and I can read it aloud for you. No worries if not, but take a couple minutes.
We're also happy to connect with folks after, because we're not shy about talking.
Yeah, we'd be happy to, if you don't have our presenters' contact info, you can email communications@northwestcuho.org and I can forward it along to them as well to connect you. I don't have a question necessarily, but I just want to say thank you so much for sharing this journey and this process with us. It's really beautiful and inspiring to hear. I know it's not without its, hiccups along the way, and I'm sure it was hard at times, but a labor of love, and we really appreciate hearing about it. Want to open the floor another moment to see if there's any questions before we wrap up. Okay. Doesn't sound like it at this point, but thank you so much. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you to everyone for joining. Again, thank you for helping us through our audio issues at the beginning. I'm hoping it's not reflected in our recording, but we will find out what went on. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.